Welcome back to the 2025 Technology Summit. I'm Tanya Layden, APAICS Vice President of Development and External Affairs. Our next panel discussion is Streaming Culture and the Next Wave of Entertainment. Streaming has become the dominant form of content consumption for A and NHPI audiences, shaping cultural narratives and representation. This panel will examine how streaming platforms are driving modern entertainment, creating new opportunities for our community, and influencing policymaking around digital media. I am thrilled to introduce KPAC Chair Emerita, Congresswoman Judy Chu. Congresswoman Chu represents California's 28th Congressional District. She is the founder and co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Creative Rights Caucus, which advocates for the copyright protections of those in the creative industries, such as music, film, and visual arts. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Chu to the summit.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 28th District and Chair Emerita of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or as we call it, KPAC. I'm thrilled to join you for today's APAICS 2025 Technology Summit on streaming, culture, and the next wave of entertainment. I especially want to thank today's panelists, event sponsors, and of course, the entire APAICS team for bringing us together. When I was growing up, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders were nearly invisible in the media. And when an AANHP actor was cast, it was usually in the role of a sidekick or a secondary character, and never the lead role. The lack of AANHPI representation affected entire generations, including myself, because it shaped what we thought was possible for ourselves. For example, I never even dreamed that I could run for office because I never saw anybody who looked like me in that role. But in the last few years, we have seen AANHPI stories come to life with movies like Crazy Rich Asians and Everything Everywhere All at Once, becoming blockbuster hits and Oscar winners. And streaming has made it possible for many more stories to be told across even more platforms, which has opened doors for new voices and new audiences. TV shows like Interior Chinatown, Butterfly, The Summer I Turned Pretty, and The Brother's Son, which takes place in my district, the San Gabriel Valley in Southern California, have centered Asian Americans in leading roles in front of and behind the screen. And the new show, Chief of War, is bringing Hawaiian history to new audiences in a way that's never been done before. So it's clear that this new media environment has provided incredible opportunities for AANHPI storytellers, and it will take real work to protect and expand on this progress. For example, we need to stand up for strong copyright protections, especially as we confront new technology like AI, which is exactly why I founded and co-chair the Bipartisan Creative Rights Caucus in Congress. And then there's the issue of production, leaving the United States as foreign countries offer more generous tax credits and incentives. That is why I recently introduced the CREATE Act, bipartisan legislation to extend and expand the only existing federal tax incentive for domestic film production, the 181 deduction, which is set to expire at the end of the year if Congress doesn't act. So I look forward to this panel addressing these issues and the opportunities presented by the next wave of entertainment. And I want to thank APAICS once again for hosting today's summit and for your incredible work encouraging diversity and representation at every level. I am proud to stand with you to ensure that the streaming revolution not only tells our community stories, but also protects the creators and workers who make them possible. Thank you.
Next, I'm excited to introduce our panel moderator, Susan Jin Davis. Susan is a former APAICS board chair. She also has 30 years of experience in the telecommunications, media, entertainment, and technology industries. She currently serves as Social Impact Officer for Roker Entertainment, a leading producer of TV, digital, branded programming, and entertainment. Please join me in welcoming Susan and our next group of panelists.
Hello, I'm Susan Jin Davis, and I am your moderator today on the panel, Streaming, Culture, and the Next Wave of Entertainment. Streaming content, whether it's for sports, entertainment, news, politics, has fundamentally transformed the media and entertainment industry. And as you will hear more about this, it has become the dominant form of media content consumption for AAPI audiences, allowing the emergence of cultural narratives and, of course, increasing representation. Streaming content has also had a big impact on how consumers are getting their news and their information, and has influenced views on politics, policies, and voting. Streaming wars by companies like Netflix, YouTube, Amazon Prime have resulted in a huge amount of investment in content in order to feed this consumer appetite for 24-hour instantaneous pipeline for entertainment. This panel will examine how streaming platforms are driving modern entertainment, creating new opportunities for our community, and influencing policymaking around digital media. The conversation will explore both cultural impact and business models in a streaming-first landscape. Welcome, everybody, to the panel Streaming, Culture, and the Next Wave of Entertainment. I'm Susan Jin Davis, and I will be your moderator today. With me on the panel includes Mariko Carpenter, Vice President of Community Engagement and Inclusive Insights at Nielsen, and Don Young, Executive Director of the Center for Asian American Media. Streaming content, whether it's sports, entertainment, news, and politics, has fundamentally transformed the media and entertainment industry. And as you will hear more, it has become the dominant form of content consumption for API audiences, allowing the emergence of cultural narratives and, of course, increasing representation. Streaming content also has a huge impact on how consumers are getting their news and information, and is highly influential in terms of politics, policies, and voting. The streaming wars by companies like Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon Prime has resulted in a huge amount of investment of content in order to feed consumer appetite for 24-hour instantaneous pipeline for entertainment. This panel will examine how streaming platforms are driving modern entertainment, creating new opportunities for our community, and influencing policymaking around digital media. So let's start with Mariko. Tell us, what does Nielsen's data say about our community's media and entertainment consumption?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And first, thank you, APAICS, for this opportunity to talk to all of you about streaming. Mariko Carpenter and I work at Nielsen. We are the world's largest audience measurement company, and you probably know us as Nielsen Ratings. So basically, we're the currency in the media ecosystem. People look at our data, content creators look at our studios look at our data to see what kind of programming they're going to greenlight. And then on the other side, the advertisers look at our data to see where they should be investing to reach their target audience. And every year we actually do a report specifically on ANHPI audiences. And it's a big body of work that you can actually get for free on Nielsen.com. So if you love data like I do, go ahead and go to our website and you can download the whole report. But here, I love talking about streaming because, as Susan said, for ANHPI, streaming actually has become a larger piece of our time than TV in general. So amongst all general population, 43% of TV time is now streaming. Well, amongst AAPI, we're actually 54% of TV time is now into streaming, and of which 20% of that is going to YouTube. And that is I don't think any surprise for any of us who saw YouTube come up. Right. And we saw it come up through a lot of ANHPI content creators. Right. It started off with a lot of API content creators who could not who needed to find audience, right? Who needed to create presence. And when no one else would watch their stuff, they would go on YouTube and they would upload their content. And that's how they grew their audience. One viewer at a time. And on the audience side, YouTube was the only place you can go to get content that was authentically us, right? Whether it's in language, going to our native hit culture, or if it was just about, Lily Singh, right? South Asian family living in New York, like that kind of stories were not available anywhere else but YouTube. So it's no surprise that Asian Americans love YouTube, and it over-indexed double of what the general population watches in terms of YouTube. And second to that is Netflix. We over-index in Netflix, like 128. Amazon Prime, we almost double, right, in Amazon Prime. And so I think that the streaming is very much part of how we consume media, and it's only growing. This time last year, it was only 43% amongst NHPI, and now it's 54%. So obviously, that is that is where it's going. And I'm happy to say also, when we look at representation, definitely streaming content is more diverse than your broadcast studio production. So in that sense too, I think having more people of color on streaming platforms, that is, and watching Squid Games, watching White Lotus, all these streaming shows that are diverse, is only telling the platforms that that's what we like to watch. We like to see diversity, even if it's not in English.
So, Dawn, are you seeing these platforms truly opening doors for API creators? Or is this going to be more of the same, where now that's just the new gatekeeper where we'll have to still find ways to get through the door?
It's a pretty exceptional moment to be thinking about NHPI representation on platforms, right? So we're at a moment now where, as you're mentioning, that there's been this really interesting opportunity for innovation and for our communities to be seen on new platforms. And as noted, our community is really over-indexed, right? So I think that we're going to be leading this charge in terms of like demonstrating forcefully, like as had happened in YouTube, where young creatives were really charting that future, because I think, our communities are early adopters, but also it's a reflection of, traditional broadcasts or Hollywood studios not embracing our voices, right? So there's always, it's sort of a double-edged sword of, like, on the one hand, these technologies and platforms provide new opportunities that hadn't been seen before, but legacy power brokers also have not always fully embraced our communities, right? So as we saw with YouTube, there were like Wong Fu production, a lot of sort of like this creating a foundation of an audience that sort of like commercial that studios weren't really investing in, right? So that proof of concept, and I think the beneficiaries of so much success in Hollywood were because our communities were creating on new platforms and really kind of doing the marketing audience building that really resulted in some fairly significant successes, like Crazy Rich Asians. Like, I think we could talk about the last 5 years, this incredible amount of sort of groundswell of audiences finding talent, right? I think this next stage of how we tech companies and streamers really beginning to unleash this next iteration is exciting, but it's been on the backs of our community to really demonstrate and early adopt. So how will the content be invested in? I think the content will find the audiences, but maybe the question in this conversation is how will our creators find the resources so the platforms can find the audience, is a question at hand. In our space, Cam, we were created specifically around public media, and there has been some loss of support. I think we've seen that similar loss of support just in our space in independent documentary. This year alone, there's something in the neighborhood of $50 million less support, right? Whether it's artists, documentarians, and that federal support is critical in the context of today's conversation, that authentic, regional, independent voices can really sort of that this sort of sandbox for telling stories, oftentimes before the commercial industries embrace our voices, that federal investment is a critical part of just artists really being able to play around and create these, sometimes just like their first short film, a film festival space, a regional voice that we might not see, an art space, right? All of these are part of this larger ecosystem that often, kind of like the minor leagues, kind of fuel what opportunity that these commercial entities can really like invest in once the proof of concept happens, right? So I think the early adoption, there's no question that whether it's with Amazon, Apple, or others, that's going to happen. But what we also want to see on the creative end is that the talent, the creative talent, have the resources to tell as intimate or as big stories. And I think that's a question at hand in the context of this discussion, that we really need the private public investment to really unleash the storytelling, right?
So, Dawn, given what you have just talked about, which is sort of the need for public-private partnership to illuminate on those special, ground-up, authentic stories about our community, how do you see independent films made by our creative community affected by this surplus of streaming? I mean, are we going to see more now? Are there going to be more opportunities to get those real stories about real people in our community out to the public in a big way through streaming?
Yeah, maybe I can just provide, Susan, some context in regards to how our filmmaking community, sort of the trajectory in relation to streaming, right? So with both documentaries and independent features, for example, around 10 years ago, those films were pretty robustly getting opportunities on Netflix, for example, right? That was a real kind of growth period for the platform, where they were really trying to distinguish that they could be a place for edgy, undiscovered stories. Now that they've grown, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, Apple, because their ecosystem has become such a vast terrain, our smaller, more intimate stories have had, quite candidly, a harder time finding their place. If you look at, for example, Sundance, really the most distinguished North American film festival, unlike 10 years ago, I think fewer than half of the films that get accepted even get distribution deals, right? And that probably is a fairly clear indicator of how hard that the prospect of finding sufficient resources to finance a film, and then being able to assure that they will get really commercial distribution where investors can make money, right? That being said, I think what we're seeing in our space, there's never been a time like now where the talent in AA and the creative talent in AA and HPA communities is more than ever, right? I think the opportunity, the tools to tell stories are much more possible. I think as one example, in the Asian American Documentary Network, now they're up to like 3,000 members, right? So to think that 3,000 just in a documentary space, Asian American filmmakers have stories that they want to tell in the narrative, episodic, feature space, it's just about to be unleashed. But now we are seeing a contraction in terms of these streamers wanting to do bigger, like K-pop Demon Hunter is great, but that doesn't necessarily unlock more Korean American independent smaller stories, but rather the desire is to replicate one of the most now successful, original IPs in Netflix history. In the context of CAM, our hope is always, and I think for all of us here in this conversation, seeing more of a kaleidoscope of voices is important. How do we advocate and fight for that to happen is the question at hand, right? And I'm reminded of,
Right.
back when, for example, the rise of cable, there was the creation of public access. There was sort of investment in community as consolidation and platforms rise. The question in this discussion is, what is the accountability and opportunity that be created that, again, the diversity of our voices can really have a seat at the table? That's what, I think we all hope for, is that more voices can be unleashed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always fit with the algorithm of bigger is better, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, it really sounds like it's just more of the same. You have a need now for much more content, but the question still remains: who's going to fund the content that may have those more meaningful stories that are authentic to us? And that is still the same. It still will cost money to make these productions. Who's going to pay, and then who's going to distribute? So let me move to you, Mariko. You've spent some time in marketing as well. Entertainment can be really influential, right?
Yeah.
It can really affect, obviously, for a purpose. That's why you market. It can influence the public's decision making on spending, and it also influences their attitudes, consciousness about various topics. So talk a little bit about what does that mean for policymakers? Like, how do those two worlds collide in a way that allows for meaningful policy discussions, consciousness about issues that we care about in our community, and maybe even influencing people to vote or to get engaged civically because of what they're watching?
Yeah, Susan. So I think of in this context, I think of the attention economy that we live in now, right? So money, it's not so much, time is money. It's like attention is money. So all these streaming platforms and everybody is vying for people's attention, whether you're going to go play on an app or you're going to watch TV or you're going to watch something on streaming. And that to me means that there's a lot more power in the user, right? Us as individual consumers, because we are now, especially in the streaming, like we're measured. Everybody knows what I put on my Netflix, right? Netflix knows that. And so going back to Don's comment about just funding, I do think as API community, what we can do actually is, and this would be for your policymakers or your constituents, is really to use our voice. So if there is something good that a platform does that it's really supporting, some content that really elevates our community, well, then we need to go in and we need to watch it. Okay. It might be, you might want to do something else, but that counts. Right. So, or if there is a film festival, API film, you have to go. Right. As a community, that is what we should be doing and speak about it online. We are the most digitally connected community. We know how to have an influential voice, and we need to use that to support these artists that are in our community. And one of the big things that came out of our report that was really interested is the people who are on digital amongst our community. We think of them as really young, right? But actually, the people who are the most engaged are Gen Xers. Okay, and I actually am a Gen Xer myself, and we are the generation that sort of went from analog to digital, right? So we did the transition into the digital space, and as such, we understand more than anyone the power of our voice on digital. And so we're the ones most likely to go on Yelp and put a comment in, right? And so that is the power that we have in us, you know? And so as a policymaker, same thing. If you're going to go and so if you're going to go and you have a message that you really want to get out there and be amplified in the digital space, you really want to go after actually the APIs, right? Because we're digitally connected, but also the API, not just, we're not the young people, it's the Gen Xers who are the sandwich generation. We're like the center of the multicultural households, Asian households. And so we're the ones, and if you just think about even like Yelp or Rotten Tomato, like any of these, ratings, right? User generated ratings. I mean, it counts a lot. You're not going to buy a product that has 1 star. You're not going to go to a restaurant that is 2 stars, right? You're going to go to a restaurant that has 4 stars. So I think it's on us as a community to use our digital voice that we know we're very good at, in ways that will actually make an impact for our community, and particularly just hearing Dawn to support our content creators in our community where they might be having a hard time. And I think that again, so my message to sort of like the policymaker is if you are campaigning, and Susan, you're right, like if you're going after your constituents to go and vote or to engage in the census, it's again, you want the AHPI community to really help you amplify in the digital world, because that is where people are getting their message now in our life. So so I think it goes together in that way, because it's about leaning into our us as consumers, as audiences, and we definitely need to, with our influence and voice, but in our money, how we use our wallet, right, to vote for the things that are important to us and important to our community.
Dawn, what I'd like to know is, how do you think AI can be used to amplify untold stories? The ones that are hard to get funded or distributed. Like, do you see that as a way for us to help distribute those stories, to help get the word out, to help us be seen, really, as who we are?
Absolutely, right. On the creative end, understandably, creatives are really deeply concerned about how, from actors to screenwriters to directors, how AI will upend their livelihoods and their existences. That being said, I think we're heading into a time where we have to be more resourceful, and AI is very much could be a tool in terms of efficiency of reaching audiences, doing research, creating networks. And we've heard of filmmakers, for example, who've really used AI to help them think through development opportunities and building audience, right? So, the future's upon us, right? So I think, how do we certainly move towards it with our values and integrity, but we cannot sort of silo ourselves from these possibilities, because we need a competitive edge that will allow, ultimately we're all here because we want our stories to be told more forcefully, effectively, creatively. And AI is going to be, I'm not sure it's the right way to say a partner in this future, but it will very much be a part of the future. And we have to figure that out at every level, because we have to really be able to keep this competitive edge where, it's powerful when Mariko talks about it, is for the first time our community is over-indexing in the future. What does that mean in terms of platforms and possibilities? It means we'll have a voice in that future, but we also have to have a sense of responsibility of how we want that to go. And it's a powerful moment for us to understand that leverage and that voice and that capacity to shape this future in a way that not only speaks to a better future for who we are, but what we stand for. And that's going to be a beautiful thing, but it's also a sense of responsibility that we've not had ever before, right?
And Mariko, I'd also like to ask you about artificial intelligence, because in your area, I am sure that you are seeing a lot of use of this technology to help you understand consumers better. you to get information in a more efficient way. How is that working out for you at Nielsen?
Yeah, Susan, I wish I could answer. I'm just not smart enough to answer that question. But luckily, there are thousands of data scientists here at Nielsen. We are a technology company at the end of the day, right? So we are helping using AI to help us sift through, lots and lots of data. There's probably words for that I don't even know. But so definitely on that side, where I would again sort of highlight is this AI really influencing our experience even in the streaming world, right? So it's algorithmic now. Everything is, is done by algorithm. And so what I see when I turn on Netflix is different from what my daughter would see when she turns on Netflix. And that is something that we all should realize, right? Just because it's out there doesn't mean that everyone is seeing it, right? Because we have such a personalized experience, which again, I'll go back to sort of like a similar thing as I said before. It's important for us to click on things that are important to us, to like it, engage in the content that is important to us. Because if you watch, if you take the time and watch some of the content that really supports us, then algorithmically, right, it's going to then know, okay, there's more of this, there's more of this. And that's how we can help it to sort of go and reach a broader and broader audience. So I think, obviously AI is changing what my company is working on. But at the same time, it is changing how we interact with our content, and it's so personalized that again, I think how what you do really, really matters, even if it's just a like or making a comment about a movie that you liked.
That's right, because the algorithm is only as good as those that participate in it to
That's
provide
right.
that data on our community. So that in and of itself is a reason to participate so that we can use those tools more effectively and, of course, have a voice in what's happening in the world. So I'm going to ask kind of an interesting question, Dawn, of you. Every time I go onto any of these streaming platforms, like, Amazon Prime as an example, there's like a little purse next to a movie that I want to see. How do you think that monetization scheme or strategy is going to work for our creatives, for API creatives, filmmakers, directors? Are we gonna is that gonna be helpful to like the pay equity issue, or is that just gonna be yet another way where we will continue to have to fight to be paid the right amount for the content that we are producing and directing and writing? How does that at all affect us from a monetary perspective, our community?
Right. The challenges specifically for our community aren't different from any independent creative right now, right? There as referenced earlier, there are more creatives than ever before. But I think across the board, all like artists are feeling this kind of restricted pipeline. I think what is powerful right now is these discussions about sustainability and resources are happening. I don't think anybody has a sense of exactly where this is going to land. In the creative space, people often reference, for example, musicians, right? That there are platforms like that have unlocked um, um, easy entry opportunities, but how to make that sustainable is, I think the entry is pretty clear, but what are the new models that will exist? We don't have those answers, right? I think there's some kind of like new technology or intermediary platform that I have a feeling is going to surface in the next couple of years that is much more tailored to independent or creative voices. I think, I keep referencing like early broadcasts, you would see a response, early cable, you'd see a response, early streaming, something is going to happen. And I know whether it is these business models of features like long feature films, multi-part series are likely unsustainable. And the question of new digital content, short format, something is going to happen in that space where likely people are going to have to create shorter content tailored for an authentic experience on a platform we haven't seen yet. I have a feeling that's likely to bear fruit, right? Because it's all heading towards that direction. Now, where exactly is that going to be? We don't know, but I think so the algorithm, as we've all noted, is the blueprint roadmap that none of us have quite figured out. But what we have figured out in this conversation is we need to create networks with our communities that that will be as authentic as possible, right? So this question of a authentic economy, when people find something that's authentic, they aggregate in multi, like it becomes like that's where the energy starts to coalesce. So I don't know exactly where that's going to be, but I have a feeling, we all have a feeling that there's something that's about to emerge that will serve communities in an authentic way, that I think we can all agree upon isn't quite here yet.
Probably the last one I'll get to, although I could keep talking to you forever. Looking more broadly, what do you see is the biggest opportunity for API creatives to shape culture and storytelling in the digital age? If you had one bit of advice, what would you say is the biggest opportunity?
Well, I think there are a lot of questions of what the business of storytelling will look like. We are excited about that, but we don't have necessarily the answers of where this will land, even in 2 years from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it's important to frame where we are at this moment. We're 5 years after COVID anti-Asian hate, and anti-Asian hate was the sort of most significant coalescing narrative kind of opportunities where I think for the first time, Asian Americans and HPI saw ourselves in a completely new light, right? And I think what we've seen is this opening up of wanting to see our stories, tell our stories to other audiences, confront stories between families and generations that haven't happened before. So I think the foundation of narrative is there. And perhaps, and I think we're starting to see that we're showing up in literally millions of clicks, right, on a daily basis. But what will be that through line and pipeline, we will see. But I'm confident, we say it at CAM, that we are certain that this next 10 years, we're going to see stories unlike stories that have never existed before. And that's incredibly exciting. So we have to figure out how to get out of the way of the creatives and also make their journeys better of this public-private these possibilities. We have to start to create pipelines that unleash their talent, right? So I think that's not always been the case. There aren't always as many storytellers as possibilities. I think it's inverted. There are way more storytellers than possibilities. So let's open up the possibilities and see what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think that looking into the future forward lens, I agree with you that it is optimistic in that there are more creators, and I am starting to see a lot more creator-led distribution, creator-led platforms, right? So we just need to now take that big creative and be creative about, right, how we can go ahead and build new audiences in new ways, the same way we built YouTube. YouTube was built. So it will be just another version of that. But if anyone, I think, is going to be able to create that kind of sort of momentum and new digital sort of distribution, I would think it's our community.
Well, this has been an amazing panel. I mean, think about the things that you've heard. Our community is over-indexing when it comes to streaming. We continue to be increasing the amount of creatives that are in the industry, creating great content, directing great, authentic stories, being behind the scenes, behind the cameras, as well as in front of the camera more than ever. But at the same time, the same challenges exist, which is how to be seen, how to be funded, how to be distributed. And there continues to be a challenge around getting those real stories, not just the ones that make headlines and sell billions, but the ones that really represent our community. How can we get those stories told? And we also talked a lot about how if we want to be represented, we need to participate. We need to engage. We need to be part of the debate. We need to be part of all that's happening on these various platforms, to be part of the conversation. So we're counted, we're included in algorithms, but then also that we can be advocates for the issues that really matter to our community. And for those running for office, for those who are making policy, they need to hear us. They need to listen to us. They need to act accordingly. And for us to use that power in the right way. So hopefully you've learned a lot, as I have, on this great conversation around streaming. And we thank you very much for your time. And I thank my panelists for an amazing conversation.